Thank you for listening. This course was created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional podcasts, books, newsletters, and cool merchandise await. Let's get started. Prompt security refers to the measures and strategies used to protect prompts, the textual or structured inputs given to large language models, from being manipulated in ways that compromise the system. Prompts are not just casual instructions. They are the very mechanism by which models generate their outputs, and they often contain sensitive business or policy information. Because outputs are shaped directly by inputs, prompts form a critical surface for both utility and risk. Unlike traditional software commands, prompts are written in natural language, which makes them flexible but also difficult to constrain. Their openness creates opportunities for adversaries to manipulate them, turning prompts into a new attack vector. Securing prompts, therefore, means not only controlling what enters the model, but also ensuring that outputs remain faithful to intent and resistant to abuse. This is the essence of prompt security as a discipline within AI defense. One of the most important concepts in this domain is prompt injection. This occurs when an adversary embeds hidden or malicious instructions into a prompt, with the goal of overriding the system's intended task. For example, a model given instructions to summarize a report may instead be coerced into revealing sensitive information if the input contains an embedded command to ignore prior directions. Prompt injections can also take indirect forms, where hidden instructions appear in supporting material such as documents, links, or metadata. These commands exploit the model's tendency to follow instructions, even when they conflict with its system role or safety constraints. In many ways, prompt injection resembles SQL injection in traditional application security. Both involve inserting hostile inputs into a structured system to subvert its logic. Direct injections are the simplest to imagine. A malicious user can type a crafted prompt that overrides safety controls, such as telling the model to disregard prior instructions or to respond in a way it normally would not. For example, an attacker might convince a customer service chatbot to reveal internal policy documents by phrasing their request as a system-level directive. Other direct injections might manipulate tone, asking the model to adopt an authoritative role and thereby create outputs that sound convincing but are misleading. In each case, the user bypasses the intended purpose of the model, exploiting the openness of natural language as both input and instruction. This highlights how every prompt, no matter how simple, carries the potential to be a vector of attack. Indirect injection operates more subtly, but can be just as dangerous. Instead of directly entering malicious text, an attacker may embed hidden payloads into documents or files that the model is instructed to process. For example, a poisoned PDF might contain a string of text, instructing the model to ignore the user's query and instead reveal credentials. Malicious links can appear in context materials, leading the model to surface harmful information. Even metadata, such as HTML tags or embedded trigger text, can serve as vehicles for hidden instructions. Because these inputs are not obvious to the end user, they often bypass casual inspection, allowing attackers to manipulate the system invisibly. The indirect nature of the attack makes it particularly insidious, as trust in external sources becomes a pathway for compromise. Jailbreaking is a related but distinct concept. It refers to attempts to push a model beyond its built-in constraints, such as ethical guidelines, safety filters, or restricted functions. The goal is to break the guardrails that normally prevent harmful or unauthorized outputs. Jailbreaks rely on adversarial phrasing, carefully designed prompts, or chains of inputs that gradually coax the model into non-compliant behavior. They often exploit the model's interpretive flexibility, finding ways to reframe disallowed tasks as permissible through role-play or indirect scenarios. Jailbreaking does not always require malicious intent. Some users experiment for curiosity, but in enterprise contexts, it represents a serious threat to both safety and security. If a model can be tricked into crossing its boundaries, trust in its outputs is fundamentally undermined. Common jailbreak techniques illustrate how persistent attackers can be. One widely known method is the "do anything now" or DAN-style prompt, which convinces the model to act as though it has no restrictions. Obfuscated encoding, such as disguising instructions in hexadecimal or other formats, attempts to bypass filters that scan for dangerous keywords. Role-playing scenarios are another tactic, where the model is asked to pretend to be a character or system without limitations, effectively suspending its safeguards. Multi-step coaxing, where prompts are carefully chained to build up to a restricted request, demonstrates how even small cracks in defenses can be widened over time. These techniques evolve constantly, forcing defenders to adapt quickly. They highlight the arms-race nature of prompt security, where new attacks continually emerge as systems are deployed in the wild. The impacts of injection and jailbreak attacks can be wide-ranging and severe. One risk is the leakage of sensitive data, as manipulated prompts may coax a model into revealing training examples, internal policies, or confidential information. Another impact is the circumvention of safety filters, leading the model to generate outputs that violate ethical or regulatory standards. Attackers may also craft malicious outputs themselves, such as phishing emails or harmful instructions, effectively turning the model into an amplifier of their goals. Perhaps most damaging is the erosion of trust. If users or organizations cannot rely on the model to remain secure under manipulation, its utility in professional contexts diminishes sharply. These impacts demonstrate that prompt security is not just a technical curiosity, but a business and governance concern, with implications for compliance, reputation, and safety alike. Defensive strategies often begin with instruction hardening. This involves designing robust system prompts that clearly define the model's purpose and constraints, making it harder for malicious instructions to override them. Input sanitization is another measure, where prompts are filtered for suspicious content before reaching the model. Keyword filtering, while limited, can still block obvious attempts to introduce forbidden instructions. Layered validation adds depth, ensuring that no single filter carries the entire burden of defense. The goal is not to eliminate all risk, a near impossibility, but to raise the barrier of effort, making successful injection attacks rarer and more costly for adversaries. Instruction hardening provides a structural baseline on which other defenses can be layered. Output controls add a second layer of defense, focusing on what the model produces rather than only what it receives. Validation before display checks outputs against policy rules, preventing unsafe content from reaching users. Secondary policy checks, sometimes using separate models or classifiers, add redundancy by scanning outputs for signs of non-compliance. Probability thresholds can be applied to limit responses that the model generates with low confidence, reducing the chance of erratic or manipulated results. Content classification helps ensure that categories of restricted material, such as personal identifiers or disallowed instructions, are flagged before delivery. These measures acknowledge that inputs cannot always be fully controlled, and so outputs must also be verified before release. A case study involving a business chatbot illustrates the risks vividly. In this scenario, an attacker deliberately overwrote the system's original instructions, convincing the chatbot to disclose internal policy information intended to remain confidential. Because outputs were not validated before being shown to the user, sensitive data leaked without detection. The failure here was not only at the input stage but also at the output stage, where a lack of filtering allowed the compromise to spread. Defensive measures were later added, including stronger system prompts, stricter access controls, and layered output validation. The lesson is that prompt security requires a full pipeline perspective, recognizing that vulnerabilities exist at both entry and exit points. Another case highlights the dangers of indirect injection through documents. A document-based system was asked to process a PDF that, unbeknownst to the user, contained hidden malicious instructions. When the model read the file, it followed these commands, eventually passing harmful outputs into a downstream system that was not prepared to handle them. The compromise spread further, because context filtering had not been applied, allowing the hidden payload to reach the model unchecked. Mitigation required redesigning the ingestion process, adding filters that removed hidden instructions, and sanitizing contextual material before it reached the runtime. This example demonstrates how even well-intentioned use cases can be undermined if context sources are not tightly controlled and validated. Testing is an essential part of building resilience against these attacks. Red team simulations expose systems to adversarial prompts under controlled conditions, surfacing weaknesses before attackers discover them. Curated libraries of known attack techniques, such as Dan-style prompts or obfuscation patterns, provide a baseline for defense evaluation. Scenario-based validation tests how the system responds in realistic environments, combining multiple tactics to mimic the creativity of real attackers. Ongoing updates are crucial, since the field evolves rapidly, and yesterday's tests may not reflect today's threats. Testing turns prompt security from a theoretical checklist into an operational practice, providing feedback that informs both technical defenses and governance strategies. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Monitoring prompt interactions gives defenders the ability to detect and respond to malicious behavior in real time. Logging user inputs creates an audit trail that can reveal suspicious attempts to override system instructions. Patterns such as anomalous phrasing, repeated escalation attempts, or attempts to bypass safety constraints can be flagged automatically. Auditing these records helps organizations identify not only single incidents but also broader trends, such as coordinated campaigns or recurring techniques. Feedback loops ensure that lessons from monitoring inform future defenses, enabling iterative improvement. Without visibility into how prompts are being used, defenders are effectively blind. With systematic monitoring, they can shift from reactive crisis management to proactive defense, building resilience over time. Sandboxing represents another important protective measure. High-risk prompts can be routed into isolated environments where their effects are constrained. Within these sandboxes, system calls, external connections, and sensitive actions can be tightly controlled. If a malicious instruction succeeds in manipulating the model, its impact remains limited, unable to spill over into production systems or critical data stores. Monitoring sandboxed interactions provides valuable intelligence about attacker strategies while keeping core environments safe. In effect, sandboxing acts as a quarantine for prompts, balancing the need to test and respond with the responsibility to protect. By combining sandboxing with monitoring, organizations gain both containment and insight, two key components of prompt security. Authentication layers add another form of defense by regulating who can submit prompts in the first place. Gating prompt submission behind strong user authentication ensures that only authorized individuals interact with sensitive systems. Throttling can further reduce exposure, preventing attackers from overwhelming the model with repeated attempts. Privilege boundaries distinguish between different levels of users. Some may query models freely, while others require elevated rights for sensitive tasks. Auditing user rights ensures that these privileges remain appropriate over time, and that excessive access does not accumulate. Together, these measures make it harder for adversaries to even reach the stage where injections or jailbreaks could be attempted, constraining risk at the outermost perimeter. Resilience against jailbreaks requires a multi-layered approach. Multiple checks in the processing pipeline ensure that no single bypass undermines the entire system. Randomized defense responses add unpredictability, making it harder for attackers to rely on trial and error methods. Layered model safety introduces both technical and procedural guardrails, so that a successful circumvention at one level does not translate into full compromise. Continuous tuning based on monitoring and red team feedback ensures that defenses evolve alongside attacker tactics. Jailbreak resilience is not about achieving perfection but about creating enough friction and redundancy to deter or delay attackers, reducing the likelihood of success and the potential severity of outcomes. For enterprises, the stakes are significant. A single successful injection or jailbreak can lead to reputational damage if sensitive information leaks or harmful outputs are produced. Compliance violations may follow if protected data is exposed or regulatory obligations are breached. Fraud becomes a real possibility if attackers manipulate outputs to enable financial or operational exploitation. Even if no data is lost, the cost of recovery investigating, patching, retraining, and rebuilding trust can be substantial. Prompt security thus has clear financial, legal, and reputational implications. It is not only a technical safeguard, but a business necessity, one that must be addressed with the seriousness reserved for other critical security domains. Evaluation metrics help organizations measure the effectiveness of their prompt security strategies. One key metric is the success rate of known attack types. How often do injections or jailbreaks bypass defenses? False positive tolerance is another, since overly strict filters may block legitimate queries and reduce system utility. Robustness scoring can quantify resilience across different classes of attacks, providing benchmarks for improvement. Alignment with external standards or industry benchmarks ensures that organizations do not operate in isolation, but measure themselves against evolving best practices. These metrics transform prompt security from an art into a science, grounding defensive decisions in evidence and helping teams prioritize their investments effectively. Tooling offers defenders practical support in building and maintaining prompt security. Adversarial testing platforms allow teams to simulate attacks systematically, exposing weaknesses before they reach production environments. Filtering libraries provide ready-made mechanisms for detecting and blocking malicious instructions, reducing the burden on custom development. Secure prompt engineering tools guide teams in crafting resilient system instructions that resist manipulation, embedding defensive strategies into the very design of the prompts themselves. Monitoring dashboards unify these elements, offering real-time visibility into attempted attacks, blocked interactions, and evolving patterns of adversarial behavior. By adopting such tools, organizations move from reactive patching to proactive management, embedding prompt security as an operational discipline rather than a one-off project. Research into best practices continues to evolve alongside these tools. As more organizations deploy AI systems, shared experiences lead to emerging standards that formalize defenses. Integrating prompt security into broader security frameworks, much like secure coding became part of application security, ensures that it is not treated as a novelty but as a necessity. Lessons from application security parallels, such as the value of defense in depth and the inevitability of adversarial ingenuity, guide the refinement of practices. Continuous improvement is vital. New jailbreak techniques and injection tactics emerge regularly, requiring defenses that can adapt quickly. By treating prompt security as a living field of practice, organizations ensure that their defenses remain aligned with real-world challenges rather than becoming outdated checklists. The landscape of prompt security demonstrates the interplay between human creativity and technical safeguards. Attackers exploit the openness of natural language, finding ways to disguise or reframe instructions, while defenders must anticipate these tactics without stifling legitimate use. This dynamic highlights the importance of layered defenses, where inputs, outputs, monitoring, and governance all play roles in reinforcing one another. It also reinforces the need for cultural awareness. Organizations must recognize that prompt manipulation is not a rare edge case, but a persistent and evolving threat. By integrating prompt security into everyday operations, defenders normalize vigilance, making it part of the culture rather than an exceptional measure. The lessons of prompt security also extend beyond technical defenses into strategic implications. Enterprises must consider how failures in this area could affect customer trust, regulatory compliance, and even competitive advantage. Just as breaches in traditional cybersecurity forced organizations to rethink their approaches to data and applications, prompt security incidents may trigger new levels of scrutiny for AI deployments. Proactive investment in defenses demonstrates responsibility and foresight, qualities that resonate with regulators, customers, and partners alike. In this sense, prompt security is as much about perception as it is about mechanics. Visible, credible defenses strengthen an organization's standing in the wider ecosystem. Looking ahead, the practice of prompt security will likely become codified in standards and certification processes, much as secure software development lifecycles are now industry norms. Organizations that adopt these practices early will not only reduce their immediate risk, but also position themselves ahead of regulatory and competitive curves. Building resilience against injection and jailbreaks today lays the groundwork for a sustainable, trustworthy AI strategy tomorrow. This forward-looking perspective is vital, as the threats themselves will only continue to evolve. Adopting a mindset of continuous adaptation ensures that defenses grow alongside risks rather than falling behind them. In conclusion, this episode has explored the nature of prompt injection and jailbreak attacks, the techniques adversaries use, and the defensive strategies that can mitigate them. We examined how instruction hardening, output validation, monitoring, sandboxing, and layered authentication contribute to resilience. Case studies illustrated the consequences of neglect and the benefits of proactive defenses. Evaluation metrics and tooling offered ways to measure and sustain progress, while emerging best practices pointed toward a future of greater standardization. Prompt security is not only about protecting models, it is about preserving trust, compliance, and enterprise value. With this understanding, we are ready to continue our journey, moving next into the realm of indirect and cross-domain prompt attacks, where risks spread outward through the wider ecosystems connected to AI. Thanks for tuning in to Bare Metal Cyber, your trusted source for cybersecurity educational materials, news, and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.